On our anniversary night, my husband raised his glass, smiled at the crowd, pointed at a man standing behind me and said, "Lauren, introducing your boyfriend?" And everyone laughed, but I didn't because I had never seen that man before in my life. The restaurant was glowing in soft golden light, the kind that makes everything feel warmer than it really is, crystal glasses catching reflections, quiet music drifting through the air, and for a moment everything had felt perfect, or at least close enough to pretend. 2 hours earlier, I had stood in front of the mirror adjusting my dress, telling myself that tonight mattered, that maybe this dinner would fix the distance that had slowly grown between Ethan and me over the past year. The late nights, the short answers, the way he had started looking at his phone more than he looked at me. I remember thinking that if we could just sit down, laugh, celebrate, maybe we could find our way back to who we used to be. When we arrived, people greeted us with smiles, friends hugged me, his coworkers shook his hand, and everything felt like a scene I had seen 100 times before. Polished, predictable, safe. Ethan played his role perfectly, charming, confident, the kind of man everyone admired, the kind of man I used to believe I understood. We sat at the center table, surrounded by people who thought they knew our story, who raised their glasses and told us how lucky we were, how strong we looked together, and I smiled because that's what you do when everyone is watching. You smile and you nod and you let them believe the version of your life that feels easiest. But even then, something felt off, something small and quiet, like a thread pulling loose beneath the surface. The way Ethan kept scanning the room. The way his jaw tightened for just a second when the door opened again. I noticed it, but I ignored it because I didn't want to ruin the night, because sometimes it's easier to pretend you don't see the cracks. Then I saw him. The stranger. He didn't walk in like the other guests, didn't smile or greet anyone. He just stood there near the edge of the room, half in shadow, like he wasn't sure if he belonged or didn't care if he did. He was wearing a dark jacket, nothing flashy, nothing that would draw attention, and yet somehow I couldn't look away. His eyes moved across the room slowly, deliberately, until they landed on me. And when they did, something inside me shifted, not recognition, not exactly, but a strange, uneasy feeling like he knew something I didn't. I looked away first. I told myself it was nothing, just another guest, maybe someone Ethan invited and forgot to mention, maybe someone from work, maybe I was overthinking again. But then Ethan stood up, lifted his glass, and everything changed. His voice cut clean through the room, confident, playful, just loud enough to make everyone turn. And when he made that joke, when he pointed behind me without even looking, I felt every eye shift in my direction, every conversation pause, every smile hang in place just a little too long. A few people laughed, unsure at first, then louder when they realized Ethan was serious or pretending to be, and I forced a smile because I didn't understand what was happening, because I thought maybe this was some kind of surprise, some joke I wasn't in on. Slowly I turned around. The stranger hadn't moved. He was still standing there, still watching, but now his eyes weren't on me. They were on Ethan. And the look in them wasn't confusion. It wasn't embarrassment. It was something else entirely. Something heavy. Something deliberate. Something that made the air in the room feel thinner. Like the night we had planned so carefully was about to slip into something none of us could control. For a second, no one said anything. The music kept playing, soft and distant, glasses still in midair, smiles frozen halfway between polite and uncertain. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, to ask Ethan what he was doing, to ask the man who he was, but before I could speak, the stranger took a single step forward, just enough to step fully into the light, and in that moment I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding, it wasn't a joke that had gone too far, and whatever was about to happen next, it was going to change everything. I did not turn back immediately after he stepped into the light, because something in the way Ethan suddenly went quiet made my chest tighten before I even understood why. A moment ago he had been smiling, relaxed, playing to the room like he always did, but now that smile was gone, replaced by something smaller, tighter, like he had just seen something he could not explain away. I slowly faced forward again, my heart beating faster than it should have, trying to read the situation from the outside the way everyone else was. Around me, people were still holding their glasses, some halfway through a sip, others glancing between Ethan and the stranger, unsure if they were supposed to laugh again or stay silent. I could feel the shift in the room, that subtle change when a joke stops being funny but no one wants to admit it yet. Ethan let out a short laugh, the kind that sounds forced if you listen closely, and he lifted his glass a little higher as if to pull the attention back to himself. "Come on," he said lightly, his voice just a little too loud. "Do not tell me I am the only one who sees this." A few people chuckled again, softer this time, uncertain, looking at me for confirmation, but I had nothing to give them. I did not know the man standing behind me, and more importantly, I did not understand why Ethan was pushing this so hard. That was when I noticed it, the way Ethan's fingers tightened around the stem of his glass, the faint tremor he was trying to hide. It was small, almost invisible, but I had known him long enough to see it. He was not joking anymore. He was reacting. I turned slightly, just enough to look at the stranger again without making it obvious, and this time I paid closer attention. He was calm, almost too calm for someone who had just been dragged into a situation like this in front of a room full of people. His shoulders were relaxed, his expression steady, but his eyes were sharp, focused, locked on Ethan like he was waiting for something very specific to happen. Not confusion, not embarrassment, expectation. That was what unsettled me the most. It was like he had been here before in his mind, like this exact moment was not a surprise to him at all. Swallowed, my mouth suddenly dry, and leaned slightly toward Ethan, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "Ethan," I said quietly, "who is that?" For a fraction of a second he did not answer. He just kept staring at the man, his jaw tight, his posture stiffening in a way that did not match the easy confidence he had been showing all night. Then he finally glanced at me, his expression shifting too quickly, like he was trying to cover something up before I could catch it. "No idea," he said, brushing it off with a small shrug, but his voice did not sound convincing, not to me, not anymore. I studied his face, searching for the version of him I trusted, the one who would tell me the truth even when it was uncomfortable, but all I saw was hesitation. That hesitation spread through me like a slow, cold realization. This was not random. This was not a mistake. Whatever was happening, Ethan knew more than he was saying. Behind us, a chair shifted, the faint scrape of wood against the floor cutting through the silence, and the stranger took another step forward, closing the distance just enough that he was no longer part of the background, no longer something we could ignore. Conversations around the room had completely stopped now. No music, no laughter. Just the low hum of air conditioning and the quiet sound of people holding their breath without realizing it. I felt every pair of eyes on us, waiting, watching, judging, and for the first time that night, I was no longer worried about how we looked as a couple. I was trying to understand what was real. The stranger's gaze shifted just for a second, from Ethan back to me, and something in that look made my stomach drop. It was not accusation. It was not anger. It was something closer to concern, like he was about to say something he knew I was not ready to hear. My fingers tightened around the edge of the table, grounding myself, forcing my voice to stay steady even as my thoughts began to race. "If this is a joke," I said quietly, not sure if I was speaking to Ethan or the man behind me, "it is not funny anymore." And for the first time since he walked in, the stranger finally spoke, his voice calm, clear, and impossible to ignore, cutting through the tension in a way that made the entire room lean in without moving. "You are right," he said, looking directly at me now, not Ethan, not the crowd, just me. "It is not a joke." And in that moment I knew whatever came next was going to be the truth, whether I wanted to hear it or not. I felt the weight of his words settle into the room before anyone else reacted, like the air itself had changed, heavier, harder to breathe through. And for a second I could not move, could not even blink, because something inside me was trying to catch up with what I was already starting to understand. He was not confused. He was not lost. He had come here for a reason. Ethan let out a short breath beside me, almost like a laugh but without any humor in it, and stepped forward slightly, placing himself just enough between me and the stranger to interrupt whatever was about to happen. "Okay," he said, forcing a casual tone that did not match the tension in his shoulders. "This has gone far enough." He turned toward the man, his smile tight, controlled, like he was trying to pull the situation back under his control. "I do not know who you think you are, but you are clearly at the wrong event." His voice carried across the room, steady on the surface, but I could hear it now, that edge underneath, the kind that only shows up when someone is trying too hard to sound calm. The stranger did not react the way I expected. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He simply watched Ethan, almost patiently, as if he had already heard this version of the response before. "I am exactly where I need to be," he said quietly, and that quietness somehow made every word land harder. A murmur moved through the guests, low and uncertain, People shifting in their seats, glancing at each other, trying to decide if they were witnessing a misunderstanding or something much more serious. I looked at Ethan again, really looked this time not at the man I thought I knew, but at the man standing in front of me right now, and the difference was impossible to ignore. His posture was rigid, his eyes no longer moving naturally but fixed, calculating, and there was something else there too, something I had never seen before, something closer to fear than anger. That realization sent a chill through me, because Ethan did not scare easily. "Lauren," he said, turning to me quickly, his voice softer now, more controlled, like he was trying to bring me back into a version of the night that made sense. "This is nothing. Someone trying to make a scene. It happens." He reached for my hand, but I did not take it. Not because I was angry, not yet, but because something in me had already started pulling back, creating distance I could not explain. "Then why are you acting like this?" I asked, my voice lower than I expected, but steady enough that people nearby could still hear it. His expression flickered just for a second, and that was all I needed. The stranger shifted his weight slightly, stepping closer into the circle of light above our table, and now everyone could see him clearly. He was older than I first thought, maybe mid-30s, with a calm, composed presence that did not match the tension he had walked into. He reached into his jacket slowly, deliberately, and for a split second, I felt the entire room hold its breath again, but he did not pull out anything dramatic, nothing threatening, just a folded envelope, worn slightly at the edges like it had been carried around more than once. He held it in his hand but did not open it, not yet, like he understood that the moment was not about what was inside but about what it meant. "You can tell her it is nothing," he said, his eyes still on Ethan, "but I think she deserves more than that." The word deserves echoed in my mind, louder than anything else he had said so far. I felt my heartbeat pick up again, not fast and panicked, but heavy, deliberate, like each beat was pulling me closer to something I could not avoid anymore. Ethan shook his head quickly, stepping forward again, this time more urgent, like he was trying to cut this off before it could go any further. "Do not," he said under his breath, his voice dropping low enough that only the three of us could hear it now, but I heard it clearly, and so did the stranger. That single word, that warning, confirmed everything I had been trying not to believe. This was not random. This was not a misunderstanding. This was something Ethan did not want me to hear. I looked from him to the envelope, then back to the stranger, and I felt something shift inside me, something quiet but final. "No," I said, my voice stronger now, louder, cutting through the silence in a way that surprised even me. "If you came all this way, then say it." The stranger met my eyes again, and this time there was no hesitation, no uncertainty, just a quiet resolve that made my chest tighten. He nodded once, slow and deliberate, and lifted the envelope slightly, not handing it to me yet, just making sure I understood what was about to happen. Around us, the room had gone completely still, every conversation gone, every movement paused, as if the entire night had been building toward this exact moment. "My name is Noah Bennett," he said calmly, his voice steady enough to carry across the room without effort, "and I am not here because of you." He paused just long enough for the words to settle, for the meaning to begin forming in my mind, and then he finished the sentence in a way that made everything inside me drop at once. "I am here because of your husband." The moment his words landed, I felt something inside me tighten, like a thread being pulled too far, too fast, and suddenly I was no longer standing in a warm, familiar room surrounded by people who knew me. I was standing in a space that felt unfamiliar, uncertain, like I had stepped into a version of my life I did not recognize. Ethan did not respond right away, and that silence said more than anything he could have said out loud. I turned slowly toward him, searching his face for something, anything that could make sense of what was happening, but all I found was tension, the kind he could not hide anymore no matter how hard he tried. "What does he mean?" I asked, my voice steady but quieter now, more controlled, because I was no longer asking out of confusion. I was asking because I needed the truth. Ethan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair, forcing a small smile that did not reach his eyes. "It means nothing," he said quickly, too quickly, like he had prepared that answer before I even spoke. "He is trying to twist things. I do not even know this guy." The stranger did not interrupt him. He did not argue or raise his voice. He just stood there, holding that envelope, watching Ethan with a calm that felt almost out of place in a room filled with tension. That calm made Ethan's reaction look even more unstable, even more forced. I noticed the way Ethan avoided looking directly at him now, the way his eyes kept shifting back to me, as if trying to pull me away from whatever this was becoming. Then why is he here? I asked, and this time I did not look at Ethan when I spoke, I looked at Noah. The question hung in the air for a second, and I could feel the room leaning in again. Everyone waiting, everyone listening. Noah took a slow breath like he was choosing his words carefully, not because he did not know what to say, but because he knew exactly how much those words would matter. I told you, he said gently, his voice lower now, more direct. I am here because of him. Ethan let out a short, frustrated laugh, shaking his head as if this was all ridiculous, as if he could still turn it into something small, something dismissible. This is unbelievable, he said, looking around at the guests, trying to pull them back onto his side. He walks in, makes vague statements, and suddenly we are supposed to take him seriously? A few people shifted in their seats, unsure, caught between loyalty and curiosity, but no one spoke. No one defended him. That silence felt louder than anything else. I could feel it pressing in around us, tightening the space, making it impossible to ignore what was happening anymore. My gaze dropped to the envelope in Noah's hand, and something about it made my stomach twist, not because I knew what was inside, but because I could feel that whatever it was, it mattered. It had weight. It had purpose. And it had been brought here for me. What is in that? I asked quietly, my voice softer now but sharper, more focused. Ethan's head snapped toward me immediately. Lauren, do not, he said, his tone changing, losing that polished calm he had been trying to maintain. There it was again, that edge, that urgency. He did not want me to see it. He did not want me to know. That realization settled into me slowly, but once it did not leave. I looked back at him, really looked this time, and I saw it clearly now, not just tension, not just discomfort, but fear. Not fear of embarrassment, not fear of a scene, but fear of exposure. And that changed everything. Why not? I asked, holding his gaze, not backing down this time. If it is nothing, then it should not matter. For a moment he said nothing. His lips parted slightly, like he was about to respond, but no words came out. Behind him, Noah took a small step closer, closing the distance just enough that he was no longer outside the conversation, he was part of it. He lifted the envelope slightly again, his eyes meeting mine, steady, unwavering. I did not come here to embarrass you, he said quietly. I came because you deserve to know what has been happening behind your back. The words hit harder than I expected. Not loud, not dramatic, but precise, like they had been waiting for the right moment to land. I felt my fingers tighten against the table, grounding myself, holding onto something solid as everything else started to shift. Around us, the room had gone completely still. No movement, no whispers, just silence stretching between each breath. I could feel every second passing, feel the weight of the choice in front of me. Ignore it and walk away, or face whatever truth was about to be revealed. I took a slow breath, steadying myself, and looked directly at Noah. Not at the envelope, not at Ethan, just at him. Then show me, I said, my voice calm but firm, leaving no space for hesitation. And for the first time since he arrived, Noah nodded without pause, like this was the moment he had been waiting for all along. For a moment no one moved, not even Noah, not even Ethan, like the entire room was waiting for someone else to stop this before it went any further. But no one did. I watched Noah's hand as he slowly opened the envelope, careful, deliberate, like he understood that whatever was inside did not just carry information, it carried consequences. The soft sound of paper sliding against paper felt louder than it should have, cutting through the silence in a way that made my chest tighten. Ethan shifted beside me, and I could feel the tension radiating from him now, no longer hidden, no longer controlled. Lauren, he said again, his voice lower, sharper this time, you do not need to see this. This is exactly what he wants. I did not look at him. I could not. Because something inside me already knew that if I looked at Ethan right now, I might hesitate, and I did not want to hesitate anymore. I had spent too long ignoring small signs, brushing off uncomfortable moments, convincing myself that things were fine when they were not. Not tonight. Not now. Noah pulled out a single sheet first, then another, stacking them neatly in his hand before finally looking up at me. "I am not going to hand this to you yet," he said calmly, his voice steady enough to keep the room anchored. "Because once you see it, there is no going back to how things were before." His words settled heavily in my mind, but instead of scaring me, they did the opposite. They made everything clearer. "There is already no going back," I replied quietly, and I meant it. I could feel it in the way the room looked different now, in the way Ethan no longer felt like the same person standing beside me. That version of us was already gone. Noah studied my face for a second, like he was making sure I understood what I was choosing. Then he gave a small nod. "All right," he said softly. He turned the first page toward me but kept his grip on it, holding it just close enough for me to see without letting it leave his hand. At first, my eyes struggled to focus, not because the words were unclear, but because my mind was racing ahead of them, trying to prepare for something it could not fully imagine. Then the details started to settle. Names, dates, locations. I recognized one name immediately. Ethan's. My breath caught just slightly but enough for me to feel it. Beneath his name were records, transaction summaries, timelines that stretched back months, maybe longer, all connected in a way that did not look accidental, did not look misunderstood. It looked planned. Carefully planned. I blinked, forcing myself to read more, to make sense of what I was seeing. But the more I looked, the less it felt like confusion and the more it felt like clarity. A cold, steady kind of clarity that did not come with shock, but with realization. Ethan stepped closer, his voice tight now, no longer pretending. "This proves nothing," he said quickly, his words coming faster, less controlled. "Anyone can put something like this together. You do not even know where he got it from." I finally turned to him slowly, and for the first time since this started, I did not see confidence, I did not see control. I saw someone trying to hold on to a version of reality that was slipping away. "Then explain it," I said, my voice calm, quieter than his but stronger. He opened his mouth, then paused just for a second, and that second was enough. It was enough to confirm what the paper already suggested, what Noah's presence already implied. He did not have a simple explanation. Behind me, I could feel the attention of the entire room shift again. Not toward the stranger this time, but toward Ethan. The questions were no longer about who Noah was. They were about him. Noah lowered the paper slightly but did not take it away completely, giving me space to process, space to breathe. "There is more," he said quietly, not as a threat, not as pressure, just as a fact. My heart beat slower now, heavier, like it was adjusting to a new rhythm, one that did not rely on trust the way it used to. I looked at the paper one more time, letting the details settle into place, then lifted my eyes back to Noah. "Show me the rest," I said, because at this point, not knowing felt worse than any truth he could reveal. Noah did not rush this time, and that somehow made everything feel heavier, more deliberate, like each second was stretching longer than it should. He slid the next page forward slowly, his eyes never leaving mine, as if he wanted to make sure I stayed grounded while everything else shifted. I reached out instinctively, but he still held onto the paper, keeping it between us, not out of control but out of caution, like he understood that this was not just information, it was impact. My eyes moved across the page, and this time it was not just names and numbers. It was patterns, repeated entries, dates that lined up too perfectly, transfers that connected one account to another, then another, like a trail that had been carefully constructed to look invisible at first glance but became obvious once you knew where to look. And right in the center of it, over and over again, was Ethan's name. Not once, not twice, consistently. My fingers curled slightly against the table, and I felt a quiet pressure build in my chest, not sharp, not explosive, just steady and undeniable. I did not feel shocked. I felt certain. That was the part that unsettled me the most. This was not a misunderstanding waiting to be cleared up. This was something that had been happening for a long time. "This does not prove what you think it proves," Ethan said quickly, stepping closer again, his voice more urgent now, the words coming out faster than he could control them. "You are looking at pieces without context. That is how people get misled." I did not respond right away. I kept reading, letting the silence stretch, letting him fill it if he wanted to. He did not. That silence answered more than his words ever could. Noah shifted slightly, then reached into the envelope again and pulled out something smaller this time. A printed image, folded once down the center. He hesitated for just a fraction of a second before opening it, and that hesitation caught my attention immediately. This mattered. I could feel it before I even saw it. He turned it toward me slowly. At first, my mind refused to process what I was looking at, not because it was unclear, but because it was too clear. It was Ethan. There was no question about that. The angle, the lighting, everything was ordinary, almost casual, like it had not been staged, like it had been captured in a moment that was never meant to be seen. He was standing outside a building I did not recognize, his posture relaxed, his expression neutral, but he was not alone. There was someone else beside him. A woman. She was close enough that there was no distance between them that could be explained as accidental. Not inappropriate in a way that crossed any visible line, but close in a way that suggested familiarity, comfort, something established, something real. I felt my breath slow, not because I was calming down, but because my body was trying to keep up with what my mind was processing. I looked at the date printed in the corner. It was recent. Too recent. Within the past few weeks. My gaze shifted slightly, catching another detail I almost missed. The location tag. I knew that place. Not from experience but from something Ethan had told me. A business trip. A meeting he said ran late. A night he said he stayed at a hotel because it was more convenient. I blinked once, slowly, and something inside me settled into place with quiet precision. Not anger. Not yet. Just alignment. Pieces connecting in a way they never had before. "Lauren," Ethan said again, and this time his voice was different. Not defensive. Not confident. Careful. "You are making this into something it is not." I finally looked at him, really looked, and for the first time I did not search for reassurance. I searched for truth. And I realized something I had not allowed myself to see before. He was not trying to explain. He was trying to redirect. That difference mattered more than anything else. I turned back to Noah, my voice steady, quieter than the tension around us. "Who is she?" I asked. Noah did not answer immediately. His eyes flicked briefly toward Ethan, then back to me, and in that small movement, I understood that this was not the full story yet. Not even close. "That," he said slowly, lowering the image just slightly but not taking it away, "is where this starts to become something you cannot ignore." And even before he said anything else, I knew he was right. The silence after my question stretched longer than anything else that had happened that night, and for the first time I could feel the weight of every person in the room pressing in, not just watching but waiting, like they all understood that whatever answer came next would define everything that followed. Noah did not look away from me, but his expression changed. Just slightly, the calm still there, but now layered with something heavier, something that felt almost reluctant. "Her name is Claire Bennett," he said quietly, and the moment the last name left his mouth, something inside me shifted again, sharper this time, more precise. Bennett. The same last name he had introduced himself with. My eyes flicked between them, between Noah and the photo still held in his hand, and the connection formed faster than I expected. "Your wife," I said, not as a question but as a realization. Noah gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Yes," he replied, his voice steady. But there was something underneath it now, something personal, something that made this more than just evidence, more than just exposure. This was not just about me anymore. It never had been. I felt the air leave my lungs slowly, not in shock, but in understanding, in the quiet recognition that this was not a coincidence, not a misunderstanding, not something that could be explained away with the right words. This was deliberate. I turned to Ethan again, and this time I did not hesitate. "Is that true?" I asked, my voice calm, even almost detached, because somewhere between the first page and this moment, something inside me had already started to separate emotion from reality. Ethan did not answer immediately. He looked at Noah first, then back at me, and for a second I saw something flicker across his face, something that looked almost like calculation, like he was trying to decide which version of the truth would cost him the least. "You are making assumptions," he said finally, his tone measured, controlled, but no longer convincing. "A picture does not tell you anything. People meet. People talk. That does not mean what you think it means." His words might have worked an hour ago, maybe even earlier tonight. But not now. Not after everything I had already seen. "Then tell me what it means," I said, holding his gaze, not letting him redirect, not letting him move past it. "Because right now it looks very clear." The room remained silent, but it was a different kind of silence now. Not confusion, not uncertainty, but attention, focused, unwavering. Everyone was listening. Everyone was waiting for him to answer. Ethan exhaled slowly, running his hand along the back of his neck, a gesture I had seen 100 times before when he was uncomfortable, when he was buying time. "It means nothing more than a conversation," he said, but even as he spoke, his eyes did not hold mine the way they used to. They shifted just slightly, just enough to break the connection. That was all it took. Noah lowered the photo slightly, his voice calm but firmer now, no longer holding back. "It was not just a conversation," he said, and this time there was no hesitation at all. "It has been ongoing for months." The word months echoed in my mind, louder than anything else, stretching backward, connecting moments I had ignored, late nights, missed calls, vague explanations that I had accepted because I wanted to believe him. I felt my grip tighten against the table again, but my voice did not shake when I spoke. "How do you know that?" I asked. Noah met my eyes, steady, unflinching. "Because I followed the pattern," he said. At first, I did not want to believe it either. I thought it was a misunderstanding. But then the dates lined up. The same nights, the same locations, the same excuses. He paused, just long enough for the words to settle, for the connections to form in my mind without him needing to push them any further. And then I saw them together. The simplicity of that statement made it heavier, not dramatic, not exaggerated, just real. I turned back to Ethan one last time, and now there was no confusion left, no uncertainty, just a quiet, steady clarity that settled deep in my chest. "You told me you were working late," I said softly, not accusing, not raising my voice, just stating something that no longer felt like a memory but like evidence. Ethan did not respond, and in that silence, everything he had not said became louder than anything he could have. I held his gaze for one more second, waiting, giving him one last chance to tell me something real, something honest, something that could change even a part of what I now understood. But he did not. And that was the answer. The silence that followed was not empty. Anymore, it was full, heavy with everything that had just been exposed. And for the first time that night, I was not the one being pulled into uncertainty. I was the one standing still while everything else shifted around me. I did not look away from Ethan, even when I felt the weight of every gaze in the room pressing harder, because this moment was no longer about the audience. It was about the truth that had finally stepped into the light. He exhaled slowly, his shoulders dropping just slightly, like something inside him had given up trying to hold the image together. "Lauren," he said, softer now, almost careful, like he was choosing a different approach, "you are taking this too far." I tilted my head just a little, not out of confusion, but because the words felt distant, disconnected from everything that had just been laid out in front of us. "Too far," I repeated quietly, and even to me my voice sounded different, not hurt, not angry, just clear. That clarity seemed to unsettle him more than anything else. He stepped closer, lowering his voice, as if trying to pull me back into something private, something controlled. "This is not what it looks like," he said, the sentence slow, deliberate, familiar in a way that made something inside me settle even deeper. I had heard versions of that sentence before, not about this, not about something this big, but about smaller things, moments I had dismissed, details I had let go because they did not seem worth questioning. Now they all lined up in my mind, not as isolated memories, but as a pattern I could not ignore anymore. "Then what does it look like?" I asked, not raising my voice, not stepping back, just holding him there in that moment with me. He hesitated again, and this time he did not even try to hide it. His eyes moved briefly, searching for something, an angle, an explanation, a way out, but there was nothing left to use. Behind him I could feel the quiet presence of Noah, steady, not pushing, not interrupting, just letting the truth stand on its own. "It was not supposed to happen like this," Ethan said finally, and those words landed differently than anything else he had said so far. Not denial, not confusion, admission, just enough of it to change everything. I felt something inside me shift, not breaking, not collapsing, but aligning completely, like the last missing piece had just fallen into place. "So it did happen," I said, "and it was not a question." He closed his eyes for a brief second, then opened them again, and whatever resistance had been there before was gone. "It started as work," he said quietly, not looking at Noah now, only at me, as if the rest of the room no longer existed. Meetings. Late nights. I did not plan for it to become anything more. His voice stayed controlled, but the meaning behind it was clear enough without him needing to say anything else. I let the words settle, not rushing to respond, not reacting the way people might expect, because the truth was by the time he said it out loud I had already understood it. How long? I asked, and this time my voice carried slightly, enough that the question belonged to the room, not just to us. Ethan's jaw tightened again, but there was no point in holding back anymore. A few months, he said, though the hesitation in his tone made it clear that even that answer was smaller than the truth. I nodded slowly, not because I accepted it, but because I recognized it for what it was, another attempt to soften something that could not be softened. Around us I could feel the shift in the room again. The quiet realization moving through people who had come here expecting celebration, and were now witnessing something else entirely. I took a slow breath, steadying myself, not because I was about to fall apart, but because I needed to choose what came next. I looked at Noah briefly, then back at Ethan, and for the first time since this started, I understood exactly where I stood. You made a joke earlier, I said calmly, my voice cutting clean through the silence, about me introducing someone. I paused just long enough for the words to register, for the memory of that moment to resurface in the room. But it turns out, I continued, my gaze steady, unwavering, you were the one hiding something all along. He did not respond. He could not. And in that silence in front of everyone who had watched this unfold, the truth did not need to be argued anymore. It was already there, clear, undeniable, and impossible to take back. I stood there for a moment longer, not because I needed more answers, but because I needed to feel the final weight of what had just happened, to let it settle completely so there would be no confusion later, no part of me trying to rewrite this night into something smaller or easier to accept. Around me, the room was still quiet, but it was no longer tense in the same way. It was something else now, something closer to realization, like everyone had collectively understood that the celebration had ended long before the night was supposed to. I looked at Ethan one last time, not searching, not hoping, just seeing him clearly for who he was in this moment. Not the version I had held on to, not the one I had defended in my own mind, but the one standing in front of me, unable to meet my eyes without hesitation. I think we are done here, I said quietly, and even though my voice was not loud, it carried clean and final, leaving no space for interpretation. He took a small step forward, his expression shifting again, something like urgency returning, like he had just realized what that sentence actually meant. Lauren, wait, he said, reaching out slightly, but stopping before his hand could touch me, as if even he understood that the distance between us was no longer something he could close with a gesture. I did not step back. I did not move at all. I simply shook my head once, slow and certain. No, I replied, and that single word felt stronger than anything else I had said that night. It was not emotional. It was not reactive. It was a decision. I turned away from him then, not abruptly, not dramatically, just deliberately, letting the movement itself say what I did not need to explain. As I did, my gaze passed briefly over Noah, and for a second, I saw something different in his expression, not satisfaction, not relief, but a quiet understanding, like he knew exactly what it had cost to stand where I was standing now. I gave him a small nod, not as gratitude, not entirely, but as acknowledgement, because without him I would have walked out of this night believing something that was no longer true. He returned the nod just as quietly, then stepped back, removing himself from the center of the moment the same way he had entered it, without drawing attention to himself, without needing anything in return. I reached for my bag, my fingers steady, even though I could feel the shift happening inside me. Not breaking, not collapsing, but changing, like something fundamental had just been reset. As I moved toward the exit, the soft sounds of the room slowly began to return, chairs shifting, quiet whispers starting again, but none of it felt directed at me anymore. For the first time that night, I was not the center of anything. I was simply leaving. The hallway outside felt cooler, quieter, the noise of the restaurant fading behind me with each step, and with it, the version of my life that had existed just a few hours ago. I did not rush. I did not look back, because there was nothing behind me that I needed to see again. When I finally stepped outside, the night air hit my face, sharp and clean, and I took a slow breath, deeper than any I had taken all evening. For a moment I stood there, letting the silence settle around me, letting the truth settle inside me. It hurt in a way that was steady and real, but it was not overwhelming. It was clear. And that